Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. The lore of World of Warcraft continues to get more and more interesting. Now, current game qualms aside, I really do love this stuff, and these lore videos are probably, well, yeah, they're my favorite part of this whole job, so today I'm excited to bring you the lore of Xal'atath and Sylvanas. Now, this all comes from the 815 PTR, so there are spoilers. Now, just in terms of implications, what's here is massive, but what's also nice is that the questline is pretty great. I think it's ongoing proof that Blizzard can tell an enjoyable, large-scale, concept-driven story, they can do that maybe a bit better than, say, their execution of the faction narrative stuff. So, yeah, this is also noteworthy because Blizzard also seem to be telling their story through MMO mechanics and player choice, which again is really cool and is worthy of praise and attention. We'll get onto that in a bit though. So, in 815, the Naga invade. We don't know why, but when we defeat their warriors, we find a Naga medallion. It's written in an old language, so we need to take it to the Tortolans for deciphering. Through that, we learn from them that the medallion contains Naga attack orders, and that another strange artifact has been found near a Naga altar. Naturally, we go to investigate. What do we find? Well, that's the wrong question. Who do we find? Xal'atath. She is there at the Naga altar. She says hello and tells us that she's in a weakened state after using her power to cleanse the sword of Sargeras. Now, if you're the priest, she forgives you, and if you're not, she talks smack about the priest, talking about how you and her can accomplish so much together. Xal'atath tells us that the Naga plan is to capture 3 important relics. They intend to use those to wash away the enemies of N'Zoth, seemingly a sort of catastrophic storm. But why let that happen when we can buddy up with Xal'atath and use it against the enemy? So we set out on a new quest with our new partner, first going to Drustvar to find the Void Stone. We find the Void Stone and we use it to empower Xal'atath, giving her a spectral void elf body that she seems to be quite pleased about, seemingly considering herself to be pretty hot. We then find an ancient Naga trident and then the Tempest crown. So 3 relics in hand, we are told to go to the Precipice of Oblivion to begin the ritual. Certainly sounds ominous, and that's because it is, because when we do it, the screen fades to black and a cinematic plays. What happens here? Well, we don't know. We won't know until we see the cinematic, but we have a fair idea based on the dialogue, so let's roll that.
Hear me, God of the Deep. I have brought you the Opener, the bringer of truths, the torch that lights the way. Honor our bargain. Free me to find my own fate. A fair exchange. Shadows guide you, my dear friend.
So that gives us a fair idea about what this cinematic covers, plus Anduin also references Xal'atath freeing N'Zoth later on. Well, it basically seems like there's a conversation between the two, Xal'atath and N'Zoth, and that leads to big lore events. Overall, it seems like she uses the relics to break the final seal of his prison. I speculate that in turn, he breaks the final seal of her prison, meaning that her new body is free from the blade. We do hear Xal, after all, talk about how the cosmos is open to her. What will she do with this freedom? Will she work to raise an Azh'tar? Will she go to space in order to gather the ethereals? We don't know, but what we do know is that we are rewarded for our efforts with the gift of N'Zoth. This is a buff that is placed on players after completing the questline. Not only do we get a bizarre third eye, but we also see what other players have the eye. Perhaps Blizzard or maybe will be a bit sneaky and use this to reveal the alignment of certain NPCs. Now the eye is kind of troubling because it means that the seeds of corruption are placed within players, but what's great is that we have a choice. We can go to Brother Pike and have it removed. Now I bet that N'Zoth knows this, and that our rejection of this gift of N'Zoth, is something that will be remembered. After all, storylines based on rejecting gifts are quite common. So, if you stick with the eye, I imagine things would be extremely interesting. The eye can't be seen by people who are not aligned with N'Zoth, and that means the players will be, well, spying for N'Zoth without the Alliance or the Horde knowing. This, no doubt, gives N'Zoth enough information to perfectly orchestrate his attack on the world. And yeah, I absolutely love how Blizzard have done this. They're integrating the narrative with MMO mechanics, allowing players to choose their alignment in a way that likely will have consequences down the line. I think that's really cool, because removing the gift is like you can't reverse it. And it's like what we've seen with the Horde narrative as well. So as much as I find myself not liking, say, the Dark Shore undead narrative, which is silly and makes no sense, and some of the elements of the character-driven narrative, I will say that things like this and experimenting with player choice are great. And by experimenting with these things in BFA, Blizzard do set themselves up to tell a far more engaging player-driven story in the future where choices and player alignments matter. And going back to this particular player choice, remember that we are told by Xal'atath that we will be rewarded well in the Black Empire. Well, because of that, I imagine that entering the Ny'alotha patch with the Gift of N'Zoth buff will be quite an experience. I mean, if there's a Ny'alotha patch. That's not all though, because the faction war once again rears its head, with Sylvanas and Anduin sharing their thoughts on the situation, and in the case of Sylvanas, plans. Here's the dialogue. Xal'atath, a fascinating weapon. I have heard tales of its exploits. A pity that it now lies dormant, but anything that slumbers can be awakened. Yeah, that's kind of notable, isn't it? Because Sylvanas, when shown a dormant Xal'atath, immediately wants to awaken it. What does that mean? What happened to Xal'atath? Well, you know, we've heard of her saying the cosmos are open to her, so I imagine this is Sylvanas talking about the actual Black Blade of the Empire, not Xal'atath, the character. Sylvanas likely sees the power in this ancient weapon, a weapon that we know is powerful enough to contain an old god. Sylvanas is willing to use the enemies of the weapon against them. We constantly hear about her serving death and how it's the enemy of void. I think she just serves herself, and that she doesn't really care much for the various shifting powers. Death, void, whatever. It's all just power to her, a tool to realize her ambitions. I'm pretty sure that she is a short-term pragmatist who, in spite of her exterior, is primarily driven by fear, loneliness, and anxiety. That's extremely apparent when you dive into her backstory. She might be brutal, but I don't think she can see more than 15 feet in front of her, and I think she has target fixation. At least that's what I think. Blizzard could make this all part of her having a grand plan that extends past winning the immediate war. Other than being as brutal as possible, though, in whatever moment she finds herself in, I mean, the character of Sylvanas is kind of hard to predict. So let's move on to another line. The blade is more than a mere dagger. It is the torch that shall light our path forward. That's a red flag. We're told by Il'gynoth, 5 torches to light our path. Now, perhaps those torches are not the pillars of creation. Maybe they're other artifacts, like the Black Blade. Or perhaps it's just fancy writing. At the end of the day, it's hard to tell, and a lot of the lingering Old God hints from Legion are still relevant, and I imagine they'll be back, especially with the Emerald Nightmare. But still, Sylvanas wording it that way certainly is playing into things that we already know in an unsettling way. Let's move on. Soon I will call upon you again, champion, and together we will steer the Horde towards its destiny. The Alliance believes that by striking down Rastakhan and decimating the Zandalari fleet, they have broken us. The Horde will soon crumble. Fools, the boy king has lied to himself and his people. He hasn't the faintest inkling of what he's truly up against. Now, at first I thought this line was just bravado, but listen to this. War is a living thing. It writhes, it grows, twisting and turning until its final form is revealed. This war is about to shift yet again, and it will be this blade that guides our way to victory. So clearly Sylvanas thinks that this blade guides her to victory, a torch. Now this blade is a void creation. Who knows how ancient it is, only that, once it held an old god. Now, we're told that the various death-related forces had nothing to do with Vol'jin hearing whispers to place Sylvanas on the throne. The death forces are pretty miffed at her, with Bumsamdi literally wanting her soul. Yet, the Void says that she serves death. Well, how can that be? Because all the death people that we know of reject her. Or do they? Because Bumsamdi has a boss. We know there is something deeper to death in the Warcraft universe, something beyond the entities that we've met in-game. Perhaps there is something higher here, and maybe that is what she serves. Alternatively, could the Void have more of a hold over her than we think? Could they tie things together, maybe with how she impaled herself on Saronite, the crystallized blood of Yogg-Saron? Could it be that Sylvanas isn't aware of this? Or that she is just a pragmatist who therefore acts in an extremely predictable way, allowing the old gods to guess her actions? For the sake of her character, I hope it's more the latter than the former. Much of this, though, comes down to working out the whispers of Vol'jin, or the whispers to Vol'jin, and right now, that is just a mystery. Let's take a look at the other line though, the one about war being a living thing, and also remember we're told that Sylvanas has made life her enemy. Well, I think it's probably just the writers having a bit of fun, but let's just take it seriously for a second, because if we do, then it could be her in support of unifying the planet in undeath. And that's not a new thing in the Warcraft universe. First, Rathian wanted there to be just one faction, absolutely, so the planet wouldn't be divided. The Lich King was then aware of the wider threats, and the Lich King aimed to unify the planet as undead, knowing that that's really the only hope that they had. Well, I mean, they could take much of this, spin it in with the current Sylvanas stuff, and really have her thinking the same, and that further draws parallels between her and the Lich King. Whatever happens, we know that Sylvanas will wield the dormant Black Blade of the Empire in a future patch. Perhaps with Xal'atath being freed, Sylvanas will be able to use this weapon against the enemy. Or perhaps she only thinks that. Maybe the blade itself still can't be trusted. I mean, hell, why did the Naga have it? Did Xal'atath manipulate the Naga into gathering the relics to resurrect her? I mean, like, we just found her blade at the altar. We don't know how it got there. How did it slip out of our grasp after Legion? I don't know. I mean, when she talked about slipping away, I'm assuming she didn't just mean removed in a content patch. Okay, let's move past that to Anduin's take. The Alliance stands on the brink of victory, of ending this conflict and bringing peace to Azeroth. Sylvanas sent her champions into the shrine for a reason. She must have discovered something that can shift the war in her favor. Whatever that might be, she must not succeed. Be ready for me to call on you again. We will stop Sylvanas once and for all. So, we know that Sylvanas ends up with the blade, even though Alliance players do see this questline. Now, Anduin doesn't really seem to know what she is doing with the blade, but he does know that she must be stopped, and he goes on to say, "When Sylvanas Windrunner became War Chief, I knew we would not be friends, but I didn't want us to be enemies. Then came the massacre in Arathi, and the burning of Teldrassil. It's clear that she does not fight for Azeroth. She doesn't even fight for the Horde. She wages war upon life itself. We are so close to ending this conflict and forging a lasting peace, but if Sylvanas uncovers some new weapon that allows her to keep fighting, we must discover what she's after and stop whatever madness she seeks to unleash upon us." So Anduin makes up his mind. We will aim to find out what Sylvanas is doing with Xal'atath, or at least with the Black Blade, and stop her. Who would help us do this? Well, Shaw and SI7, I would imagine. And that means I'm pretty sure the war campaign of patch 8.2 will involve the Horde doing something very dastardly with the Black Blade, while the Alliance attempt to work out what they're doing and to thwart it. And all this does make you wonder, what can this weapon do? All we know is that it's capable of holding an immense amount of power. So what's she going to do? Sylvanas could try to use it to form a super weapon for herself. We know that Nazjatar is near the Maelstrom, and of course the Maelstrom, like the center of that, is the big wound from the explosion at the Well of Eternity. So what if Sylvanas wanted to just break the whole game between light and void, and indeed do something like capturing Azeroth's power in the blade through the Maelstrom and through that old wound? She could do that, and that would certainly be pretty damn bad for the rest of us. Finally, though, we have something maybe a bit more unsettling to talk about. We catch up with Brother Pike. He talks about the duality of the sea, and how N'Zoth wants us to be fractured and divided. Pike says that the war is giving him what he wants. That's certainly true, but there could be a second meaning, a second division, that between players who accept the gift of N'Zoth and those who do not. So while we may be in a rough spot with the game right now, look, it does set up the lore of Nazjatar, the lore of whatever comes after, to be extremely interesting. And while the Darkshore lore fumbles with, Syra and Dalaran, those things are kind of annoying to me, and I wish that they didn't go with such a, extreme and oh my god, shocking way of doing the faction war, and I wish that it was just more naturally following the, the strategic playing out of a war in a way that would onboard players more. I wish all that was the case. But what I will say is, throughout all of Legion, I've been really interested in this old god stuff, especially Xal'atath and all of that lore. And now we see that coming back again in BFA. And does this mean that I'm going to excuse maybe disagreements, the class design, and Azerite and things like that? No, it does not mean those things. what it does mean is that I at least think that one track of the game is going in a very good direction. That of the lore, the broad lore of the Warcraft universe. Maybe not the specific storytelling, of the quests that we might get, but the actual lore is really cool, and it could set up some really, really cool things. Right, if we end up in Ny'alotha in 8.3 or 8.4, at least that's the backdrop to do something really, really cool with. So, take it for what it is. This is just me being excited about the lore. I mean, yeah, it's weird. Like, I did another lore video, and people were like, why do you care about the lore? It's a dead game. And it's like, I'm talking about the lore because the lore is fun. It's got nothing to do with anything else in the game. It's just because the lore is fun. So, that's where I am after this video. There's still some more stuff to talk about, though. It's all very exciting. So, yeah, if you like the lore, let me know. Let me know what you think about all of these developments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.